Welcome to Chapter 3. We have just tested on Chapter 2. We are in the last half of Week 8. This is Lesson 3.1, Lines and Angle Pairs, Day 1, because we're going to spend 2 days on this. Today is September 23rd. Make sure that you are taking notes. You can make sure that your notes are on your own sheet of paper, or you can use the blank notes that are provided on Google Classroom. They're always found at the end of a week or in their own section. So we're going to be able to use the definitions to identify 3 different line types. You already know one of them. The 3 line types are parallel lines, skew lines, and perpendicular lines. Now you'll notice that parallel lines and skew lines have the same definition, or so it seems. They both say lines that never intersect. But the difference is that parallel lines are called coplanar. So coplanar, remember, means on the same plane. So they're on the same floor together, the same ceiling, the same wall together, whereas skew lines are non-coplanar. So they would not be on the same floor together or the same ceiling. Now it gets a little tricky because I can have a line on the ceiling that is actually parallel to the line that's on the floor. Because even though there's not a wall right there joining them, they are joined because they're on the same plane. Because remember, any 3 points make a plane. Skew, they're going to not only be on different planes, but they're not even going to be headed in the same direction. So they can't end up forming a plane that isn't distorted or twisted. Okay, we want it to not be. We want it to be a plain, flat surface. So you'll notice all 3 of my definitions have a rectangular prism, basically a room, drawn on the paper, because we need it to be 3-dimensional so we can see the difference between parallel and skew. If I just did it on the flat piece of paper, it would be really difficult to see. So I'm going to do 2 lines on the ceiling, so on the front of the room and the back of the room. Basically, when I talk about the lines in this picture, I'm talking about the edges that are formed between the planes. That's the easiest way to describe it. So we have line L at the front of the room on the ceiling, and we have line M at the back of the room on the same ceiling, and so they are parallel. Now, how do you indicate that they're parallel? We know that lines already have arrows. We're going to add some arrows. I'm going to add an arrow to line L, and I'm going to add the same number of arrows to line M. Sometimes those arrows are colored in, and sometimes they're not. It really doesn't matter as long as it's the same number of arrows and it's not the arrows that are indicating the lines. These arrows are indicating parallel. So we have a symbol for parallel, just like we had a symbol for congruent, for angle. We have, it's basically a shorthand notation. So line L is parallel to line M. So it's like a little cat scratch between the L and the M. Line L is parallel to line M. It is slightly tilted, the parallel symbol. If you don't tilt it, that's fine. Not a problem. Okay. Skew lines. So I'm still going to use line L, the one at the front of the room on the ceiling, but the other line, line M, is going to be at the back of the room on a wall. So we have the front of the room and the ceiling, and the back of the room and the wall. So if you think about your normal classroom, if you are looking up at the ceiling at one side of the room and then go back and look at the door, those 2 are not on the same plane, and they are never going to run into each other. So that's skew. Now the question usually comes up, well, aren't you just deliberately making them look like they don't intersect? I mean, can't you continue to keep drawing line M and it would intersect in line L? It won't. Remember that there's a gap right here on the ceiling. One of the lines is at the front of the room and the other is at the back of the room. So there's always going to be a gap, no matter how long the lines continue to grow. So that gap is going to prevent them from intersecting. Now there is no symbol for skew. There's nothing to indicate in the picture that there's skew. So if you want to say line L is skew to line M, you have to write it all out. Okay, so next is perpendicular lines, which we already know. They're coplanar lines that form a single right angle, And in the case of our sorry, I'm getting in a rush, I apologize. In the case of our rectangular prism, any place where two planes come together, we're talking about that making the line. And if you have two lines on the same plane that intersect, in this case, they're going to be perpendicular. So I did the easiest one here. I just put the front of the room and the ceiling, just like we've been doing the whole time for line L, the front of the room and the ceiling. And then I did the front of the room and the right wall. And so those two will be perpendicular, because if this is a rectangular prism, every rectangle's edges are right angles. And don't forget, the symbol for perpendicular is the upside down T, so line L is perpendicular to line M. If you haven't drawn these pictures on your notes yet, go ahead and pause the video and make sure you get all of this written down. State if the given lines are parallel, skew, or perpendicular, and you can see that my very first example is 0, so I don't want you writing this down, I just want you paying attention. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw on the picture we have, and then I'm going to erase it between examples. So the first example asks for line BC, which has been that line L the whole time. So in the front of the room on the ceiling, and line FG. Now you can see, hopefully, that this rectangle right here, BCGF, is the entire front of the room. So if I have line BC, which is at the top, and line FG, which is at the bottom of the same rectangle, then they have to be parallel. They're on the same plane and they're never going to intersect. So let's go to number 1 together. Line FE. So line FE is on the floor here on our left, on the floor on the left. And line CG is at the front of the room on the right. So I've got it on the floor on our left and the front of the room on the right. It's kind of like me standing here with my left hand pointing forward and my right hand pointing up. Go ahead and do that. Okay, so sorry about the phone call. If you heard that, if not, I'm glad you didn't. Okay, whoops, got to get that out of the way. Okay, so one more time. Number 1, if you think about line FE, it's like taking your left hand and pointing it forward and your right arm and pointing it straight up. Those are never going to run into each other. So this makes it skew. This makes it skew. Number 2, to get rid of those. Number 2, line FG, so the front bottom, and AD, line AD, which is the back top. Now they do seem like they're on different planes, but they're not, because even though I have a box drawn, I could have sorry about my drawing skills. I could have a plane that actually slices through the box. And so those two lines would be on the same plane that's slicing through the box. So they would be parallel. They would be parallel. Remember that the skew was like left arm out, right arm up, whereas number 2, both arms are pointing the same direction. Number 3, line FG, so again on the bottom front, and HG, bottom right-hand side, So if you think about your floor, you have 2 walls coming together on the floor. Well, they're going to be at a right angle. Now, it doesn't really look like it in this picture because we had to tweak the picture to see all the sides. But it is, in fact, perpendicular because they're on the same rectangular plane intersecting, so they're perpendicular. So what happens if you don't have a rectangular box? What if you're not using a rectangular prism? What if instead you're using a rectangular pyramid? So we still have a rectangle, so we still know we have some right angles in there, and we even have some parallel lines, but we have some skew as well. So again, same question, are the given lines parallel, skew, or perpendicular? And again, I'm going to draw on the picture so you can see it. So line EB, so the one side of the rectangle, and line BC, another side of the rectangle that are intersecting. So what do you think that would be? Good. It's perpendicular. And if you could see in the video, I've got some clues in here for you. Hopefully you'll notice them. So line AB, so down the lateral side, that's called a lateral side. So line AB down a lateral side, and line DE. Line DE, which is on the base. So if you think about your arms, let's put our left arm out, put our right arm straight up over, and then lean it to your left. Yeah, those aren't running into each other. They're not even on the same plane. So that's skew. Not on the same plane, not intersecting. And last but not least, line ED on the bottom, on the rectangle, and line CB on the rectangle, on either side of the rectangle, not intersecting. So they're on the same plane and not intersecting, they are parallel. And if you noticed, number 4's letters were purple, 5's were orange, and 6 were green, which were the color coding that I did at the initial of the note. So that was kind of a clue, but you might not have noticed that. Make sure that you go back and watch the video again if you need to. You're more than welcome to go find other videos to watch as well. And if you have any questions, please email your teacher.